They've got objects which are made of hippo ivory. Hippo is a very important, scary animal. These hippo tusks are variously described as magic wands or penis sheaths.
Oh, not again. We're back to it again.
Don't shake your magic wand at me.
Better than Nigella doing it. She'd be like, "Oh, it's lovely. Just make it up as you go along. Just do a couple of bandages and a bit of wine. That'll be grand."
Mummify someone in a microwave.
Yeah. I would trust Mary to sock me.
She would do it properly. To be fair.
Right. Gosh, this has gone really strange.
It's fine.
Gosh.
Forget about what's happening. Okay.
You are, if anything, you are powering up
Yes, yeah.
the deceased.
There's a real sense of that.
In order that they will, and we have texts that talk about this, do something beneficial for you. So the whole motivation of Egyptian religion is reciprocity. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours.
Is there a reason for not just cutting the head open? Does this body have to be as intact as possible? Because it seems like a palaver to pull someone's brain out their nose, right? If you can just chop off the top of the skull and like literally just pick it out.
Integrity of the appearance of the body for the turning it into a sark seems important, yes.
Hello and welcome to After Dark. I'm Maddy.
And I'm Anthony.
And in today's episode, we are heading back to ancient Egypt with a recurring guest to explore one of the most infamous death rituals in all of human history. Of course, it is mummification. But first, to set the scene, here's Anthony.
In the flickering light of a silent chamber beneath the sands of Thebes, a group of men stand motionless. Their heads are shaved, their bodies are cloaked in linen. The scent of resin and death hangs thick in the air. One of them kneels beside a lifeless form laid out on a slanted stone table, the body of a nobleman once beloved, now awaiting transformation. This is no ordinary funeral. This is mummification, an ancient ritual that would take 70 painstaking days to complete. It is not just a preservation of flesh, but a gateway to eternity. To the ancient Egyptians, to die was merely to step into the next phase of existence, but only if your body was intact, your name remembered, and your soul judged worthy. And so, with whispered prayers to Anubis, god of the dead, the priest slides a hooked tool through the man's nostril, stirring until it cracks bone. Slowly, the brain is pulled out, discarded as waste. This is just the beginning. Layer by layer, the flesh will be dried, perfumed, and wrapped, every amulet placed with care, every spell spoken in time. Because to get this wrong isn't just a mistake, it's a spiritual disaster. Without this process, the soul could be lost forever, or worse, devoured. This is After Dark, and this is the sacred and gruesome world of mummification, where death was only the beginning.
We are joined by returning friend of the pod, Dr. Campbell Price.
Hello again. Hi.
Hello, welcome. I should give your official title is Egyptologist at the University of Liverpool and curator of Egypt. Blah, blah, blah.
She can't say it.
Can't say it. We're keeping this in. Curator of Egypt and Sudan. I got too excited. I tripped over myself at the Manchester Museum. That's got to be a dream job.
It is.
Campbell's like, it is, just not mine.
No, absolutely. Since I was a child, and it was a mummified body in my native city of Glasgow that I encountered. And I was 5 years old, and that was it then. I didn't understand about universities and studying and museums, but I knew I wanted to be an Egyptologist. And that is what I do now. At one of the most significant collections of Egypt and Sudan, anywhere in Britain, Manchester Museum, part of the University of Manchester.
Was it a museum for you, Anthony? Because for me, it wasn't necessarily one particular museum, but it was a childhood of going to see old stuff in glass cases that cemented my interest in history. And I do think if you ask a lot of historians, that would be the start point for them.
Yeah, maybe not like a museum, but maybe a ruin or a definitely something heritagey more than she's outdoorsy. That's all I could say. But and definitely, I definitely had that Egypt time as well. I think it's one of those first really impactful things because it's quite visual. And even within that history and that story and that lore, one of the things that's so remarkable because it excites the imagination for probably very misplaced reasons when you're 5 or 6 is the figure of the mummy. And just so we're very clear on this, I suppose, to begin with, what is a mummy?
Well, the term mummy, in some ways, in certain UK museum circles now has gone out of favour because it has certain colonial associations, objectifying associations with horror movies and threat and danger and things which the ancient Egyptians wouldn't recognise. But fundamentally, if you say mummy, you mean a body which has been treated. I'm going to use my words very carefully here because I want to push back on a lot of the assumptions which were kind of embodied in your introduction that are, I think, unhelpful in actually understanding what the ancient Egyptians were trying to do. But if you say mummified body, you tend to assume it was the body of a person that was intentionally preserved. And a lot rides on the meaning of the term preserved. And actually, your introduction put a question mark on this, which I enjoyed. Ancient Egyptian mummification is about transforming the body into something else, something that will survive for eternity, but not necessarily to preserve it. Because it's a theme, I think, whenever I come to talk to you, that we've got to acknowledge the kind of modern stuff, the modern assumptions, the modern cultural baggage we impose on all of these topics. So it's not too much to say that our modern experience of death, you know, going to see grandma in a funeral home, is not what I think the ancient Egyptians were concerned with. And it's interesting that the first accounts, I don't want to jump too much straight into this, the first accounts of mummified bodies, you know, 1800s, are medical people, surgeons, who are interested in investigating, refining, improving modern embalming techniques. And they are back projecting the modern need or desire to preserve the body onto ancient evidence, which might have had a completely different...
This is amazing.
I talk about it in my book, Golden Mummies of Egypt.
What's your book called? Jealous.
Well, we had an exhibition at Manchester Museum quite recently, now finished, for which there was a book to accompany it called Golden Mummies of Egypt. And it tried to take some of these assumptions, which lots of museum visitors bring. I was a 5-year-old child who was fascinated with seeing a corpse.
Yeah.
And when we're wrestling with that a lot now at Manchester, the only ancestral remains we have on display now is the mummified body of an ancient Egyptian woman called Asru. And for some people, it is shocking and deeply distasteful that you can go and take your 5-year-old in the year 2025 and see the body of someone from Egypt who died 2,500.
Yes, I want to talk more about this towards the end of this episode because I do think the current ethics and the questions around that of the display of these bodies is very, very interesting and very important.
Yeah.
But Campbell, I want to get to the origins of mummification and what the Egyptians actually believed it was doing. You talked about transformation there because this is quite an unusual way to treat a body, even for the ancient world, isn't it? It's quite a specific process. So where does this idea come from?
Well, I mean, the origins, I mean, I'm always skeptical about trying to pinpoint origins because they go back into pre-recorded history. But there is the special treatment of the body. And so when we're considering this, we must also consider the mass of the Egyptian population that is not represented archaeologically. So the treatment you opened with, the nobleman at Thebes, 3,500 years ago, that can't have been the expectation for most people. And so just right off the bat, I suspect ancient practice was not dissimilar to modern practice in Egypt. Obviously, Egypt is a majority Islamic country now, but if people die, they are wrapped in a shroud and buried within 24 hours. Something happens early on, and by early on I mean before 3000 BCE, so that's beginning of pharaonic history, where people are buried in the fetal position. I mean, again, that has modern connotations. They're not thinking of it as the fetal position. That's the position you sleep in. And then there are later texts that say, you sleep to wake, you die to live. So the transition is leading to something else, for sure. Things become a bit more formal when we have, I mean, there are graves preserved, which have these fetal positioned bodies in. And then there are cases where people are stitched into a leather bag.
And this is at the same time as some of these aristocrats are.
No. This is pre the aristocrats. This is before 3000 BCE.
Before 3000 BCE.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is this something that's just happening to the elite, or is this across the board?
Do you know, it's to be honest with you, it's difficult to say, because unless you're buried with a great shit ton of stuff, you can't really say this person is richer than this other person or is more important. We have at Manchester Museum some objects from a burial at the site of Mahasna, so the south of Egypt. And so there were two apparently female figures, two female bodies, and they are buried with imported amber beads, weird pottery with hippos on. We've got this incredible hippo bowl. They've got objects which are made of hippo ivory. Hippo is a very important, scary animal. These hippo tusks are variously described as magic wands or penis sheaths.
Oh, not again. We're back to it again.
Don't shake your magic wand at me. But altogether, it questions, right, okay, what is going on here? Because there's no written account saying, who are these women? Are they priestesses? Are they magicians? Are they princesses? Like, what's the story? We do not know. So we've got to put our hands up. With recorded history, so where there are texts, early doors, there is the treatment of the body with resin. So resin can be sourced from minerals that come out of the ground or plant sap, plant resin. And this is so important, and it's so obvious to me now, but it's really important to emphasize that the treatment of the body after death goes hand in hand with the treatment of a divine statue. So there's the image of a god that is wrapped in linen. It is perfumed with incense and resin. It has its eye makeup done. Eye makeup that's very distinctive, Liz Taylor, Cleopatra style eye makeup. I don't think everyone's running around in ancient Egypt with the classical eye makeup like Hollywood would make out. It's performed on statues of gods, and it's performed on the dead, because we have the palettes with the colour, the malachite or the lead galena, and applicators buried in tombs. So the idea is, by putting the colour, the green colour, on your dead relative, you're turning them into something which will survive the terrible rupture of death. Because what you want to do is in some way survive, not to preserve someone as they were, but to project them into this other state of being. And I'm conscious that in the modern world, to say you're turning the dead into a statue carries this implication of objectification, that you're turning the body into an object. But we live in a world where objects are just things, and objectification is a negative, pejorative thing. In ancient Egypt, to turn something into an object, where an object is so powerful, is your only chance to survive eternity.
I have about 1 million questions. I'm so fascinated by this. So, do we know when mummification begins, even if in its earliest practices, whenever that is, and obviously we can't quite pinpoint it, is this something that's happening to statues and that is associated with gods initially, and then it transfers to dead human beings? Or is it the other way round, that human beings are being preserved like that and then they start to treat the statues of gods like that? Is this something that happens in tandem? Because treating a normal human being, even if they're incredibly important,
Yes.
unless they're the pharaoh, I guess they're not understood in divine terms. To treat a human like that, a dead human, the remains of a person, not even a living one, and then to treat the statue of a god like that, those are quite different things, but where does the overlap begin?
I really like the way you've framed that, Maddie. I mean, the answer is we don't know for sure how statues or statue images are being treated early on. But I mean, I think there's something really profound to acknowledge here, that it was clearly observed that if you have the statue of a person made of limestone or granite, that is going to last much longer than a biological body.
So it's about longevity then.
Yeah. So you want to, but there's a difference here between saying, I'm preserving grandma the way she used to be,
Yeah.
as I remember her.
Uh-huh.
That's a modern sentimental notion. But I want grandma to join the realm of images, because images will last beyond human life. So you are saying you are taking the human body and treating it in a way to change it. And I really emphasize this. It's not about making it lifelike. It's about making it statue-like.
Yeah, this makes so much sense. Because they look like that.
Yes.
That's what they
Yes.
look like. They
Yeah,
look
yeah.
like statues, especially with those painted panels
Yes, yeah.
that are put
The
on
masks
front. Yeah.
are never depictions of people as they were. I mean, people come into the museum and it's quite a normal human reaction. You said, you see things in glass cases. Oh, wow, Mum, that looks like Auntie Sue. Oh, that mask of the man looks like the guy in the coffee shop downstairs. That was not the
not the aim.
intention. They were not. It's not like Oliver Cromwell or a death mask, and that's a pet peeve. People talk about Tutankhamun's gold death mask as if he sat for the portrait, or
As if that he's looking in the mirror. Yeah.
no. This is he's shown as a perfect being. Plus, because gods have golden flesh, and so by rendering it in literal gold, you are giving the king his true golden
Gods
face.
have golden flesh.
Gods have golden flesh, bones of iron or silver, and hair of lapis lazuli.
Wow, okay.
That's why mummy masks, funerary masks, often have this very androgynous looking head covering. That's not just hair, that's meant to be the blue covering of a god's head.
And that's so interesting because that's, again, the objectification in the Egyptian sense
Yes.
of divinity. That it's sort of tangible materials that you know in the world, not some kind of abstract idea of a man in the
Precisely. I think you exactly. It's something you can deal with. Yes, they're precious materials. You have to get lapis from Afghanistan or wherever. But gold is untarnishable. Well, yeah. But precious metal has that analogy with eternity because it doesn't tarnish, it doesn't rust.
Talk to me then, Campbell, about the distance between the sort of spiritual realm, I suppose. I'm talking about that in the broadest sense of how people understood spirituality, divinity, the afterlife, that kind of the magical, supernatural elements of Egyptian life. And then the physical, because we seem to have this great importance placed on objects.
Yes.
And this idea that objects can hold power.
Yes.
Whether that's a statue or a person who is turned into a statue, essentially. Yes. But then we're also dealing with the partially decaying bodies. Obviously, they're preserved to an extent. But the bodies of people who are they're not going to stay that way forever. There is going to be some deterioration, as there is of all the objects associated with this belief system and this time. So when people are turned into statues, is there an understanding that they exist in the human realm of life and that they have been transformed? Or is there some kind of transformation that's happening that's sending them? Because obviously the Egyptians have such a belief in the afterlife that's very specific as well. So where are these people who are now statues going? What's happening? And what is that distance between the spiritual and the object? Because there's a lot of crossover, but I'm not quite grasping how that relationship works in terms of the living and the dead.
I adore you, but that is the longest question you have ever asked in your entire life.
It's a
I
great
was like,
question.
But I'm
though.
struggling to articulate it
No, I
because
know.
because there is that kind of, there's the living material world and the dead spiritual world, essentially, is what I'm saying. But there's this weird crossover, and people understand the spiritual world is existing in these material objects.
Spiritual world is existing in these material objects. Go,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the material objects as reaching into the spirit world. But like, what?
So I think,
Ultimately, the question boils down to what?
but I mean, we are dealing with such a profound set of questions that all human beings face, and we have so much evidence from Egypt that it seems natural to ask these of the Egyptians, these kind of questions. And I really do like the way you framed that. I think it's best to think in terms of a motivating factor is, and in dealing with one's own family, you want to create an ancestor that is effective and will help you with your problems. That is the motivation.
So it's about the living, really.
It is a bit. It is absolutely.
Isn't it always?
Yeah, selfish.
Who really cares about grandma and what happens?
As long
to
as she's
grandma?
pulling some strings and doing us favours.
Yes,
But that stands now.
yes.
Like, we only go through these processes not really for the people who've
No, but
passed
to
the
feel
baton.
better ourselves.
Yeah.
So
It's human
tracks,
nature. Yeah.
So I think early on, if we're thinking even before texts tell us we think what's going on, and even when we have texts, interpreting them is a nightmare. So there is evidence, archaeological evidence, of the development of simple grave, where you have the body fetal position covered up. Then the grave acquires bits and pieces, tools, pottery.
Which is the same across all of human history.
You know,
essentially.
this is fairly universal. But then there's an architectural development where the grave kind of is delineated and then covered. And then that little chamber that is developed around the grave has a little kind of annex, a little extra bit that becomes a little chapel. And it is clear, absolutely clear on archaeological plans I can show you, those little chapels attract later people bringing offerings. Why are they bringing the offerings? Is it to give the person food in the afterlife? Might be. Or is it to get
It's a
the
two-way bartering
dead
system.
person on their side to answer a question? And I have thought about this recently, and I think it is a good way to frame the discussion. Yeah, the dead don't bury themselves, it's the living. And the living believe, no one having gone to the other side to know, that to join the gods or to join superhuman beings allows the dead to in some way put in a good word with even more powerful beings. So if you have a problem in this world, you know, I want to, I don't know, buy a new thing, or I want to hurt someone, or I want to defend myself from something, you want some help. And in the pre-modern world, you ain't Googling for help.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got some medical condition, you need to ask an ancestor. And if you've invested all that time and effort in, I don't want to say laying them to rest, because that implies that
sound
they're
like that's what
being
they're doing.
ignored.
Yeah.
The whole concept of being at rest is not really.
There's not that finality at all.
No. You are, if anything, you are powering up
Yes, yeah.
the deceased.
There's a real sense of that.
In order that they will, and we have texts that talk about this, do something beneficial for you. So the whole motivation of Egyptian religion is reciprocity. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours.
Now, can I, before we go on, we want to talk about the process of what we term mummification. But before we do, you mentioned at the start, you said what we term mummies.
Yes.
This never even occurred to me. If that's what we term them, when did we start doing that and why? And did they have a specific term for them? Okay, you go, and then we'll come back to the
Yes,
the
I'm so
process.
glad you asked that. So the term mummy comes from mumia, which is a very old, centuries old, pre-15th, 16th century old term for a black mineral substance with reputed curative properties from the area of the Levant, modern, into the area of modern Iran. So it's in Shakespeare. it's mentioned in, I remember studying it in school, Othello. Desdemona has some mummy on her handkerchief. So it followed that this reputedly curative substance had been found, or identified, a substance very close to it had been identified on human bodies buried in Egypt. And it's an irony, perhaps, that a lot of biomedical interest here, big focus on how did the Egyptians do it? What was there a secret recipe? What was it? Let's crack the code. In analysing that, I think it has been established that actual bitumen, this mumia, tar, black stuff, is a component of the black goo that was applied during the mummification process. But, in the 1600s, there does seem to be, a mental connection, a linkage between curative stuff that we know of from Iran, the desire to be well and needing some medicine, and then this stuff that's found in Egyptian bodies that look like they're really well preserved and they're really old. So if that substance preserved the flesh of an ancient person, well, maybe if I grind it up and consume it, I will benefit from that longevity-inducing power. Obviously, it is, I'm not a medic, but grinding up human flesh and consuming it, not advised.
Let's not do that.
Do not try that at home.
Not great for syphilis. Apparently, it was a curative for syphilis. James I
Wow.
gave it a go.
But not so much. And so what did they call, what if they're not mummifying, what are they doing?
So in the ancient past, the closest term, and it's one of great interest to me, I'm working on something right now about this. The ancient Egyptian term is a sach.
Oh.
Sach.
That sounds so much more appropriate than mummy. That sounds so much more serious.
Mummy
and-
now sounds silly.
Yeah.
And there's something kind of dismissive about the term mummy, which is why in museums I would never write a label with the term mummy on it now. I would
Interesting.
describe a mummified body.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's just to recognise that it is the body of a fellow human being we're talking about, but also to allow this sense of the treatment of that person. But the ancient Egyptian term, and this has started to come in some museum interpretation, is sach. So sach is the perfect bound form, radiantly, brilliantly, dazzlingly white linen bound form, which it's a contradiction, it seems, to a modern Western mind, that you have someone who is wrapped and who is kind of constricted and isn't able to move. But sach can also mean the spiritual capacity to act in the way I just said, as an intercessor, as someone, as an effective ancestor. Right. So if you're imagining a totally different cultural perspective, sach, to describe the physical blue head covering, long curly beard, signs of divinity, golden flesh, radiant white linen bandages. That is the ancient Egyptian term for the thing we call a mummified body.
And it's, as you said, it's a kind of powering up of the dead and that transformation into something other. An object, yes, but an object in ancient... I understand this now. It's an object in terms of ancient Egyptian understandings of objects that are imbued with power. An object is not just a thing. It is...
It has great capacity.
Yeah, and it can move between... Not physically move, but it is exerting influence in different realms at any one time.
Precisely.
I understand now.
Okay, let's look at the details then. Let's look at how this process, we kind of talked about it in the beginning narrative section, which was blending those mythological elements and hinting at some other elements that are more historically grounded. But let's talk about the ins and outs of sacking.
Sarcifying.
Sarcifying somebody. What are we talking about here? What's the how to sarcify a body?
Right. Well, as we have consistently said, we're talking about a period, pharaonic period itself, that's 3,000 years. Egypt is big. It is by nature regional. So there's a lot of variety. Okay. So there is no
one
standard
thing.
recipe. This is what
it's
you do.
Not the Mary Berry form
it's
of
not. It's
not preserving, transforming.
Why is Mary Berry your first thought of mummification?
Mary Berry.
I feel like, wow.
If you're listening, Mary, I'm sure
That's just
Anthony's a big
factual.
Can you
fan.
imagine? It'd be better than Nigella doing it. She'd be like, "Oh, it's lovely. Just make it up as you go along. Just do a couple of
trust Mary
bandages and a
to-
bit of wine. It'll be grand."
Mummify someone in a microwave.
Yeah. I would trust Mary to sock me.
She would do it properly. To be fair.
Right. Gosh, this
Okay,
has gone really
It's
strange.
fine. Forget
Gosh.
about what's happening. Okay, tell me what. There's
So-
loads of different ways.
Right, so-
yeah.
You know, if you're an 8-year-old who comes into Manchester Museum, you have expectations that you want to know, right? So it takes many weeks, as you said, 70 days is the kind of standard length of time. And the reason we know about it is not just the survival of bodies in huge numbers, actually, from ancient Egypt, but also because outsiders like Herodotus, who's from the area of modern Turkey, actually writing for a Greek audience in the 400s BCE, thinks, ugh, the Egyptians are really weird. And that motivates almost all discussion and perception of this
Can
practice.
I just say that Herodotus comes up a lot, Campbell, in our chats as someone who just hates ancient Egypt and has only negative things to say about it.
So it's a bit of you know, I think there's a contrast there between the ancient Egyptians are wise and they're great healers and the civilization is very old and they're weird and
They do completely alien things to us.
the world's upside down. You know, women go to market and men urinate sitting down.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. Herodotus and some of his fellow historians think it is just weird to do this. And bear in mind, for Greeks and Romans, you know, yeah, you maybe bury someone, you maybe cremate someone. It's just dealing with the body, getting rid of it. Actually, the concept of an afterlife is not very interesting or sexy. To an ancient Egyptian, there is a vivid set of ideas about the afterlife. So the nuts and bolts of it are the body needs to be, yes, it's going to be transformed, but there is the clear challenge of having a corpse in a hot country. So you immediately need to deal with that. So you need to dehydrate it. Easiest way is to take out the wettest parts, which are in your chest and your head. Those parts, well, we think, as you described, metal hook goes up the nose, swizzled about, and then the brain is scooped out using a little spoon, having destroyed the ethmoid bone in the nose, which the kids love. So you seem to throw away the brain matter.
Is there a reason for not just cutting the head open? Does this body have to be as intact as possible? Because it seems like a palaver to pull someone's brain out their nose, right? If you can just chop off the top of the skull and like literally just pick it out.
Integrity of the appearance of the body for the turning it into a sark seems important, yes. So you don't want to damage the appearance, but the appearance is going to be transformed anyway.
Yeah.
So there is a conundrum there that I'm not quite sure of. So yes, the internal organs are removed, treated separately, and then they are associated after a certain period, maybe about 2600 BCE, with jars, 4 jars, the Canopic jars. It's a pub quiz question.
This is
They
what
are
every kid
canopic.
learns. Yeah.
And sometimes they have different animal heads, the 4 sons of Horus. But actually, the point of the 4 Canopic jars is to add extra power to the divinization of the deceased. So you take a part of the person and you activate 4 images of gods.
It's not just handy storage, like rather than just slopping it on the floor or putting in the bin. This is really significant spiritually.
And this is a whole thing about more modern experience of embalming, where we know in the 1700s there were canopic boxes of stuff that was taken out of cadavers and then buried with people. So the modern expectation of what that is all about preservation and actually trying to sanitize and preserve the body, is back projected onto the ancient Egyptians who were trying to activate the divinity of the dead, you know? So, of course, we have to look at things through our own eyes and through our own more recent experiences. There seems to be an attempt to keep the heart in the body. But exactly whether the Egyptians understood about the heart, it's related to judgment. Again, every 8-year-old knows. your heart is weighed on a set of scales against a feather. The feather is the feather of truth. And if in some sense it balances, then this is a positive. But again, all of this description, especially of expectations of the afterlife, come through a Judeo-Christian sense of judgment about the dead. So we're just describing the ancient Egyptians doing what we expect we would do.
Do we know in any ancient Egyptian art or writing what they understood the heart to mean? Was it associated, for example, with love, as it is in European cultures?
No. There's some sense of intelligence, but it doesn't seem to have that association with romantic love as we would think of it.
That's so interesting. So we're dealing with a completely
Different
set of understandings of what everything means.
Different understanding of anatomy, different understanding of associating different body parts with gods. This is a consistent thing in Egyptian religious texts. So your eyebrows are a certain god, your buttocks are a certain god. Each part, because it's the only way you're going to survive the terrible rupture of dying, is to cling to whatever divine association you can. So the whole body is linked to certain divine things, and you hope that that will be enough to propel it into the whatever existence is expected beyond. So the actual treatment of the body, removal of the organs, then the dehydration. Now, again, misconception here. It's not just to dry things out to preserve. So the Greeks think the Egyptians are treating their human bodies like we treat fish, to salt fish, to, consume fish ultimately to preserve it. The substance that we know as natron, which is a sodium compound, which is a dehydrating agent, is associated almost exclusively in ancient Egyptian religious texts, not with drying things out, but with purifying them.
Okay.
What do you do to a divine statue? You need to purify it. What do you need to do to a human body? You purify it. And what if the effect was not intended? The lifelike effect is just a symptom of all these treatments that you would do to a divine statue. So in the classical, actually very problematic developmental history of Egyptian mummification, it's like they do experiment for centuries and centuries and centuries until they reach the peak around, 1200 BCE. That's the peak, that's the best. And then everything after that is decline.
Wow.
I mean, it is mind-blowing to me that you would look at a culture that lasted 3,000 years. It is so patronizing to say, oh, you tried, it's an experiment, it was a bit rubbish. And then for a few years, you got it right. Well done, slap on the back. And then it was just rubbish after that. Are you being serious?
Sadly, they were.
That's
the thing, right?
This is, if you read most Egyptology books, this is how it's framed. Development, peak. Everything after is decline. In fact, what I think we're seeing, just with the way certain treatments were applied. So the body of the father of Ramesses the Great, a guy called Seti I, I've seen him, his mummified body in Cairo, and he does just look like someone who has fallen asleep.
Wow.
So you've seen the not the wrapped.
He is unwrapped.
He has been unwrapped.
He has been unwrapped in the late 19th century. And
he still looks like somebody who has just fallen asleep.
So that is praised from a modern point of view.
That it's so well preserved. They've done a successful
job. So they must have done it
yeah.
deliberately, and it was a success. But if you bear in mind, the whole point was to wrap the body up so no one would see it. So you have to then unthink. Obviously, the ancient Egyptians didn't prepare their dead for them to be in glass cases in museums. Let's be clear on that as well. So the dehydrating goes on, the purification, and then we know from some texts that talk about the wrapping of the body. So there is no text that describes how to do the evisceration or the other gory bits, because that is a modern morbid curiosity that is not a concern of ancient Egyptian people, it seems. When the Greeks and Romans come along, they're like, ugh, tell me more.
Do you think there's something as well about that whole process not being written down, that it is a practical thing that you have to learn and that's so sacred you don't need to record it? It's just a knowledge that you have if you are in the presence of people doing it, and you pass it on, you carry it on.
Precisely. I think, as you've just said, Maddy, I think it's a taboo that you, and let's be honest, modern undertaking is still a taboo. You do not want to ask what you're doing to grandma to make her look like that in a funeral home.
And there are things that are done.
And there are very interventive things.
Yeah.
And we don't want to know that. And we have a very clinical attitude to death. But I think it's true also, as you say, the reason there are no accounts of it is because it is a trade, and it is a priestly trade. It is associated with service of gods and secrecy. And
it's a mystery. It's a
mystery
mysterious process.
You're not meant to look behind the veil at that. But practically speaking, if you were an ancient Egyptian embalmer, you're not studying for your embalming your mummification exams. You're watching your father do it and learning from that.
Yeah.
So we've got this wrapping process has started now. So that comes to fruition, and then the oiling and perfuming has happened before the wrapping?
Yes,
or that's
it's happening throughout, I think.
Okay.
So it smells nice. Again, why does it smell nice? Well, because incense does smell nice and it will cover odours. But the word for incense in ancient Egyptian, senecher, is grammatically a causative, to cause to be divine. So you're burning incense to turn the deceased person into a god.
And again, that whole multi-sensory experience is for the living, not for the dead necessarily. Even though it is a transformational process on the dead body.
It is still transforming them.
But it's something that the living can share in.
Yes. And there's something about the application, particularly of this blackened substance, which as Egyptologists now, we're calling this black goo. That's the term we use. And colleagues at the British Museum have investigated the composition of black goo, and very grateful to them for sharing the results. This is something where it doesn't obey what we think the Egyptians should be doing. Black goo is applied in great profusion on the body of Tutankhamun. It's sloshed over his golden coffins. Howard Carter, when he's extracting Tutankhamun's body, as we talked about when we talked about Tutankhamun, has to use chisels, the equivalent of blowtorches, to extract his body piecemeal. So that is where modern science has trumped ancient ritual. The ritual was designed to transform Tutankhamun into a god, and that was the state he would be in. It was not to be undone. And modern unwrapping and modern investigation undoes it. So there's another case where we don't have a good example in Manchester, but in other museums. So this black goo, which is often described in Egyptological literature as a kind of as a way of covering up a bad job. If you didn't properly mummify the person, you slosh on the black goo. This is nonsense. The black is the colour associated with Osiris, the god of rebirth. Emphasis on rebirth, regeneration, new life, not with death. He's not the god of death and dying. The myth of Osiris is often cited as the divine precedent, or the kind of antecedent, the model after which mummification is practiced. No, it's the other way around. Mummified bodies are the inspiration probably for the myth of Osiris, rather than a historical Osiris really being. I mean, we're very gullible, we're very trusting
we really are.
Of ancient Egyptian sources.
Well, but also of later sources that were like, well, this must have been what was going on.
Yeah.
We're like, well, it doesn't actually look like that's what was going on at all.
Yeah, really push back on whatever the given narrative is. So Osiris is sometimes depicted as having, just jet black flesh. Let's be clear, none of these images depict people as they were. They're not living, they're gods. There are women with lioness headed. women. There are men with crocodile heads. There are gods and goddesses with blue flesh. You cannot read anything into how the people are depicted. So there are images of bright white or jet black images of Osiris. The jet black has a particular association with fertility. So putting the black goo not just on the body and the flesh, some flesh in later periods is even gilded directly in imitation of golden flesh. But you have a coffin, to us, to modern museum visitors, beautifully painted, finely decorated coffin that has had a bucket of black goo put on it to activate it as an image of a sa'ach, as an eternal image for the deceased, a godlike image. And Egyptologists get their knickers in a twist, saying, oh no, but this was varnish and it was originally meant to be clear and it's gone black with age. No. It was designed to be black because it wasn't designed to be in a museum. It was designed to be buried. And that is the transformation ritual in its final form.
I have learned so much in this episode already.
My God.
Sorry, no, go on if you want to.
Well, no, there's just one thing before we kind of start to head towards a bit of a discussion about how these things are being displayed. And that is, and this is such a evocative name, and then we have an image to go with it. But that name being the opening of the mouth ceremony.
Yes.
I think you have a copy of this image somewhere there, Campbell. We oh God, shall I even try to describe this? I'll try, okay? And we can bear in mind that I am coming way outside my comfort zone here.
That's good.
But so we have an image where there seems to be a figure that has been socked.
Yes. Blue head
Blue
covering.
hair. We have the chin.
The beard. White, dazzling white.
White, dazzling wrapping has happened. Behind, there is a figure wearing some kind of a dog wolf mask thing. I'm not sure what that person's doing, holding it up or maybe rubbing something on it. I'm not entirely sure. We're definitely making contact with it. In front of this figure, there are two women who are actually bare-chested, I think, wearing white, and they are very much venerating this image. Then behind them, we have two young men who are... What is that? There's a receptacle thing that looks like it's being held open. There's another thing that looks like a stick that's being shook in its face or something. I don't know what that is. You're going to need to help me there. And then there's one person behind them again who is dressed in like leopard skin, and has more bits and pieces in his hand.
Is that a mirror?
There's a lot of gold and decorative stuff going on in some of these items, and then there's this thing. To me, it looks like some kind of furry teddy full of plates, and I'm telling you now, that's not what it is. But it's
that's the title of this episode.
Yeah, it's very dramatic. It is very ceremonial.
Yep.
What is going on?
So what we're looking at is the most well-known depiction of the ritual of the opening of the mouth. And I think your description was very evocative. The central figure...
You're like, not right, but evocative.
Completely incorrect.
But let's go with it. So on the right-hand side of the image, you're seeing a tomb. So this is a tomb chapel, right?
Yeah.
And this is the final episode in the funeral ceremonies. So you have, again, I don't think it's a coincidence, the tallest figure is the mummified body. And you notice, actually, of the group of figures, those on the left are all living and they're looking towards the right. But the ones on the right-hand side, on a little stage,
yes,
if you like, of pure white sand, or maybe natron, who knows, is the jackal-headed god Anubis, maybe a performer in a jackal mask, and the deceased, the mummified deceased. And they are looking towards the left because they are of the world of the gods. And we know this ritual, which is otherwise attested in ancient Mesopotamia in a form, the idea of opening the mouth is to restore the senses of sight, of hearing, of taste, of speech, of touch. Not so that the mummified body can come to life and start shuffling around like a Nabbit and Costello movie, but so that they can have those capacities in the afterlife to help, as we said, their relatives who are doing all these nice things for them. So that teddy with plates
Yes.
is a pile of offerings, and that's like fruit and vegetables.
Are
and
any of those offerings plates?
I've never.
What about a teddy?
I've never. That's really so vivid. Thank you.
You don't have to say thanks, Campbell. It's fine.
But this is the world of the living and the dead encountering one another, right? And it's bidding farewell. You know, the women are shown, yes, you're right, bare-chested, because they're rending their garments, and they're pulling at their hair and throwing dust over their heads in mourning, because there is genuine emotion here. Yes, it's highly ritualized. Yes, it's a transformation, but someone has died, so there is a human emotion at stake. But that figure, and I think it's very interesting, so the figures of the living are coded male and female. Men are red, brown, women are yellow, pink. But the figure with the jackal mask and the deceased themselves are gold and yellow, because they are gods. And so it's basically, and I like the suggestion, maybe Anubis is rubbing something on the outer part of the mummified body, but he's also claiming the deceased into the world of the gods.
See, that makes more sense, let's be honest.
And there are no teddy plates.
No.
So that ritual we know is done in temples for the whole building. The whole building or statues of gods are activated. Their capacity
I love this idea of activating.
is activated.
Yeah.
That's new to me, but it seems so central to the whole concept of what's happening here is activation.
Yes. No, I think this is really something which asks you a bit more to try and think as the ancient Egyptians think, rather than the point is to preserve the body for eternity so they can have a happy afterlife. That is more a Judeo-Christian thing. So let's try and unthink some of those presumptions.
I spent my entire life trying to do that.
Well, and it's hard. It's hard, and
Yeah.
I think it's fine for us as historians, but it's so rewarding actually if you do it. If you go to a museum and you try and think, I'm looking at this painting, and what were the intentions of the person who painted this, rather than my modern 2025 vision. So I think, activation is what you're seeing here for the capacity of the deceased.
I have loved listening to all these different processes, and I have such a different understanding now of how this worked. And the word mummy for me is gone now. This is so interesting. Campbell, before we go there, we've talked about how mummies were understood and treated in the centuries between then and now. But I'm just wondering, you alluded at the beginning to the difficulty, the complication, I suppose, as a modern curator working in a museum now and across the museum community. The question of how to deal with what are human remains, and human remains that within that belief system were never meant to be disturbed. What is the current thinking, and is there huge debate still? Is the community at large moving in a particular direction when it comes to the treatment and display of these objects?
Objects in that ancient sense of capacity, of course, we wouldn't describe we have 20 people at Manchester Museum and 30 animals who are mummified, and they were collected under various circumstances. And I think in the case of the lady I mentioned before, who is on display, you can go and see her face and her toes. The rest of her is covered in ancient linen. The lady's name is Asru. When she was first unwrapped in April 1825, so we've just marked 200 years since that moment, and we use that anniversary now for the rest of the summer to talk about ancient intentions, her modern history, and we're inviting visitors to tell us what they think about her display. We've never done that before. Manchester Museum has never done that before. And I would say when she was unwrapped in 1825, people in 1825 said, should we really be doing this?
So they did.
So they did. So this idea that we live in, dare I say, a modern woke society, and we're only questioning this now because we're navel gazing.
Not true.
These questions, I can tell you, were happening in the Manchester press over 100 years ago, for sure. So it is about balance, it's about care, it's respect. I, as a child, encountered albeit a wrapped mummified body in Glasgow. And that was fundamental for me. It is definitely true, and I've witnessed this in museums. Parents and children have, or adults and children have, conversations about life and about death that they would never have
Interesting.
in normal daily life. But the fact that the body of Asru, a lady from Egypt, a lady from Africa, ancient Africa, is on display for all to see, no one gave us permission to put her body on display. So the debate is just one we want to encourage in a more explicit and transparent way. And I think I speak for other colleagues in the sector that this is something, especially talking to colleagues in Egypt itself. These are Egyptian ancestral remains. They're not my own family remains. And I think, you know, if you've ever experienced death or loss and you've encountered the body of a loved one, maybe that does change your attitude to seeing bodies on display. One thing I've tried to fathom since working at the museum is, what is it specifically about Egyptian mummified bodies that makes them so attractive? And I've been in that space and heard adults and children question whether the body of Asru is real.
Wow.
And I think initially when I started working at Manchester Museum, 13 or 14 years ago, I thought, oh, how silly of the public to think we'd mock up a mummified body. But when you think that the other big attraction in the museum is a T-Rex, and the T-Rex skeleton is a cast,
Yeah.
it's not so silly.
And thinking about the future of 3D printing, for example.
And who knows about the future of visualization. And the other thing also, you know, when you go into that space and you encounter a mummified body, I don't know if you're a child or if you're an adult, mummies exist in the same universe as werewolves
Yes.
and vampires and the creature from the Black Lagoon. Fictional things. So you're being asked to believe that you're seeing something that you know from the kind of the Hammer horror universe of monsters.
Which in and of itself has come from the legacy of the 1920s and Howard Carter and that golden age, quote unquote, of colonial
of colonial exploitation and daring do and all that white male archaeologist.
The othering of ancient Egypt and the monstrousness of it as it is interpreted by Westerners.
Absolutely, and I think there's something that the fear of the mummified dead comes out of absolutely colonial guilt and feeling that we did something terrible to the Egyptians, and they're going to get their own back. But hopefully you see the contrast between those modern mummy movies and what you see in this image, which is the deceased is triumphant, perfect, in some ways generically divine and without personality. There is no concern to record anything about the individuality of that person. And that makes us very anxious as modern people because we're so obsessed with ourselves. And I like this and I don't like this and I want myself to be like this and I identify in this way. That based on the sources we have, transition into being a god means giving up your personality and your identity and your individuality and becoming
Transcendence, isn't it?
this transcendent divine being, and only divine beings are immortal. So we all have our human foibles, and in a way mummification is about giving those up and transitioning into something permanent, which involves being like a god, and gods are gods.
We are silly, basic little things, aren't we, in so many ways? And I wish, although I'll never experience it, I wish I could be around in like 3,000 years if there's a planet left, where I can hear people talk about our belief systems in this way, because we're headed that way. Like, don't think for a second we've landed on the answers. And we do by default. It's our absolute arrogance that's kind of what we do. Campbell, this is only the beginning of a much broader conversation. If people want to read a little bit more about your research, where can they find you? What can they read? What can they see?
Well, I'm on social media at EgyptMCR, and I'm always happy to engage with people. I've just written a little book called Brief Histories Ancient Egypt, and one of the chapters in the book is what happens when you're rich and you're dead.
Perfect.
which deals with some of the things that we've been talking about. And currently I'm working on a book about faces.
Ooh.
Maybe I can come back and talk about faces, because for reasons we've outlined today, we see very distinctively ancient Egyptian faces and we respond in a certain way. We assume they're people as they were. We've even done facial reconstructions,
Yes.
recreating people in the image of ourselves. So that's my next thing, is faces.
Oh, that's
But
great.
yeah, find me on
Wait,
social
I'll
media.
definitely come back to talk about that. Thank you very much for being on today, Campbell, and thank you for listening at home. If you enjoyed this episode and you have suggestions about ancient Egypt or any other topic, you can get in touch with us at afterdark@historyhit.com. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps other people to discover us.